Tobias had long since accepted that loneliness was his destiny. Life had decided that he would be a widower, raising his son alone. Sometimes, he thought he envied his father, who had died in a car accident along with his mother. It was better to go like that, together, than to lose your wife and keep living without her. He reflected bitterly in his solitude. Tobias's grandfather, on the other hand, lived a long life and managed to keep his wife by his side until the end. However, fate was no kinder when his grandmother retired. She began to lose her memory quickly. Formally, his grandfather was still living with his wife. But in reality, he was alone. The grandmother outlived the grandfather. But at the end of her life, she no longer remembered anything, not her husband, not her grandson, not even her own son. Tobias started the farm thanks to his wife, Rosalia. It was her idea, her dream. No one could have imagined that such a strong, beautiful, and vibrant woman would live such a short time. Tobias, we know how to do everything. Why don't we dedicate ourselves to agriculture? She proposed one day with a smile. Rosalia. Why? I have a good job. I'm a mechanic. I earn enough. You don't even need to work, he replied, tenderly caressing her belly where their future son, Leon, was already growing. We have to think about the future. We can always hire people to take care of the farm. We can't depend only on ourselves. And what if one of us gets sick, or if I have 5 children and we need extra income, she said, laughing as she looked at him playfully. I like the idea of children. Especially 5. Tobias laughed. But why are you talking about illnesses? Everything will be fine with us. He couldn't even imagine that behind those words, Rosalia was hiding something she already knew about her health. She didn't say anything, fearing that they would try to convince her not to have the baby. She wanted this child so much since she met Tobias. Rosalia had told him that she dreamed of a son who would look like him, tall, kind, intelligent, and strong. That dream came true. Leon really grew up as a copy of his father. But after that, Rosalia's health deteriorated rapidly. Tobias did everything possible to save her. But within a year her condition worsened irremediably. He barely remembered how he had survived that time. He only knew that he had spent all his savings trying to cure her. Sometimes he thought bitterly that it would have been better not to start the farm and to save that money. A few days before she passed, Rosalia said something that he couldn't understand at the time. Please, don't blame yourself. I know that nothing will help me anymore. Grandma came to see me in my dreams. She told me that you would remarry and that Leon would have a wonderful mother. Everything will be fine. Just don't forget to open the box. Tobias was confused. The box? What box? You just have a fever. You'll recover. And we ourselves will raise our son. I don't want anyone but you, he responded in despair. But deep down, he already knew that Rosalia was leaving. It seemed that an unknown force was pulling her away. A whirlwind that carried her higher and higher until she vanished into an infinite sky. Tobias tried to hide his emotions. He invited a neighbor to help him take care of Leon. And he spent all his free time with Rosalia. He was irritated by the farm, which drained his strength and prevented him from being with her in her final days. He thought bitterly that if he could go back in time, he would never have started that project. A box with a secret, like the ones your grandfather made. When you find it, open it and help whoever has it. Then everything in your life will be sorted out. Rosalia repeated insistently. Tobias only nodded so as not to bother her. When she was healthy, Rosalia didn't believe in dreams or superstitions. But the illness had changed her. Okay, dear. I promise that I will open the box. I will do everything you want, he answered softly. Even though he didn't give her words much importance. Tobias remembered how his grandfather had the gift of turning simple pieces of wood into true works of art. Those boxes with secrets that he made seemed simple at first glance. But they hid an intricate mechanism inside. On the outside, they showed detailed engravings and small wooden gears. But if you turned them in the correct order, a small key appeared. With it, you could open the box. His grandfather loved to tell that this talent was passed down in his family through the male line, as a valuable legacy. For the grandfather, this was not just a hobby. It was a source of joy and comfort. Each new box he gifted to a loved one or a friend. "Look at this. Will you be able to solve the mystery?" he would say with pride, extending to Tobias one of his most recent creations. "This is a piece of cake." Tobias would reply confidently and start turning the gears according to the pattern he already knew. But he always failed. And where would the secret be if everything was so easy? The grandfather would laugh. "You have to look for a unique detail. Something that shows you where to start. Look carefully." Tobias sighed, amazed by his grandfather's patience and dedication. "And why spend so much time on just one thing? You spend a whole year with them?" he asked, intrigued. "This is for the soul, grandson. People live to rejoice, work, and share their happiness. Everything else is useless. Do you think you can take money or things to the other world?" "No. There are no pockets in the tomb," the grandfather answered seriously. At that time, Tobias found it difficult to understand those words. But years later, when he lost his wife, he understood their meaning. Her death marked a before and after. From a carefree young man, he became a man carrying the responsibility of raising his son. For Leon, he did everything he could to control his pain. He kept busy with work, improved the farm, and dedicated time to his son. Sometimes he even tried to pretend that everything was fine. But the emptiness was still there. It assaulted him at any moment, oppressing his heart with an unfathomable sadness. There was no way to escape it. He could only pretend that everything was in order. Leon always sensed when his father became distant and quiet. At those moments, he would approach him and ask, "What are you thinking about now?" Tobias would quickly recover his calm expression. "I was thinking that we should buy another cow. The one we have is starting to give good results." He would pretend to be absorbed in work, because it was easier that way. But inside he felt no relief. With time, things improved. The farm began to generate income, and life continued its normal course. But the feeling of loss did not disappear. It continued to inhabit deep within his soul like an unwanted guest. To make matters worse, the neighbors seemed to have agreed to insist that he remarry. Everyone repeated that a man could not be alone. Those endless pieces of advice irritated Tobias. He thought that loneliness was only a problem for the weak, and he had no time to be bored. Each day was full of tasks. Work, household chores, raising his son. After all that, there was only enough energy left to fall exhausted into bed and sleep. He didn't see the need to explain to the neighbors that he had enough worries. One of the many times they tried to find a partner for him was when a neighbor told him about a girl who, according to her, would be an excellent wife for him. "If I ever fall in love with someone, I will marry without thinking. But now I want to concentrate on raising my son." Tobias replied calmly. He remembered stories of widowers who remarried hastily and how their children suffered because of those new marriages. He didn't want that fate for Leon. Besides, he couldn't imagine loving someone else. Choosing a wife as if he were in a livestock market seemed humiliating to him. That's why he told the neighbors only what they could understand. However, the neighbor was insistent. "And if Leon gets sick, who will take care of him?" she suddenly asked. Those words struck a sensitive chord in Tobias. "Don't talk nonsense. Leon has never been seriously ill," he replied with worry in his voice. The neighbor seemed to have predicted the misfortune. Only a month passed and Leon was actually hospitalized with pneumonia. It all started when the school bus broke down at the worst time. Instead of worrying the adults, the children decided to walk home. They spent several hours walking through the snow and the arches, with their feet completely soaked. Who could have imagined that precisely Leon, such a strong and resilient boy, would be the most vulnerable? In the end, he always seemed as robust as steel. But the disease hit him harder than the others. Tobias couldn't get rid of the painful thoughts. More and more he noticed that his son looked more like his mother Rosalia every day. His wife also seemed strong in the face of life's adversities. But in an instant, everything changed. Her health deteriorated and she faded away in the course of a year. Like a candle in the wind. That pain was still very fresh in his heart. A month passed with endless worries and sleepless nights. Every day Tobias went to the hospital to visit his son. "You are an exemplary father," the nurses would say with a smile. Rarely does someone spend so much time at the side of a sick child. When someone is sick, it is especially important for them to feel that they are not alone. Tobias explained. The support of a loved one can be as valuable as medicine. "It's true," agreed one of the nurses. "Unfortunately, not everyone does the same. For example, almost at the same time as your son, a homeless young woman was admitted. She has no one to visit her or support her." Tobias looked up with interest. "And who is she?" "Her name is Michaela. It seems she has no family. No one visits her." "Well," said Tobias thoughtfully. "Today I brought a lot of food. Maybe I should go see her." "Leon is already joking that I'm feeding him like a hippopotamus." "Don't even think about it," another nurse interrupted. "Those kinds of people only expect someone to take care of them. Then they will be calling you asking for help. For money. Why look for unnecessary problems?" "Don't say that," her colleague interrupted her with reproach. "If someone wants to help, let them. Is that wrong?" From then on, Tobias began to visit not only Leon but also Michaela. For almost 3 weeks. He went into her room, bringing her something delicious to eat. The humble and grateful young woman accepted the treats with a smile. "You cook so deliciously. Like my dad," she shared one day. From her stories, Tobias learned that Michaela had been left without family since she was very young. After the death of her father, her stepmother kicked her out of the house, and the girl ended up in an orphanage. Growing up, Michaela worked in a warehouse and even lived there until she was discovered. Losing her job and her roof, she ended up on the street. Tobias reflected and then proposed. "If you have nowhere to go, stay with us. The neighbors will of course gossip behind our backs. But I don't care." Michaela shook her head, somewhat ashamed. "Thank you. But I don't want to be a burden. I think I can manage alone." "Come on. Don't say that," he insisted. "Tomorrow they will discharge Leon. And they also said you are better. I will take both of you home. Stay with us and then we will see what to do. I'm an honest person. Don't worry." Michaela softened a little. "You know, Leon and I have become friends. He even gave me a box saying that if I manage to open it, there will be a prize waiting for me. I hope that you don't mind." Tobias laughed. "That's my grandfather's box. Leon adores it. But it's so complicated that none of us has managed to open it. My grandfather said before he died that he hid a surprise inside. But it seems that the secret went with him. He assured the young woman that she could keep the gift if she liked it so much." Michaela hugged the box to her chest, hoping that one day she would manage to decipher its mystery. Inside, she had the hope that if she managed to open that ingenious little box, perhaps her life would also begin to change for the better. The next morning, when Tobias arrived at the hospital to pick up his son and Michaela, he was met with an unexpected surprise. Michaela had disappeared. She had left without saying anything to anyone. And with Leon, a setback occurred. The nurses informed him that to be discharged, another test had to be done. They could only let him go the next day. Tobias sighed deeply, not hiding his disappointment. "How is it possible? We had already talked about everything. Why didn't they warn me that my son would have to stay one more day? And most importantly, what happened to Michaela? Where is she?" he asked. Frustrated. "We couldn't do anything," one of the nurses shrugged. "We don't have the right to detain her against her will." Tobias headed toward the car, visibly upset. Almost in the parking lot, a cleaning lady called him in a hurry. She explained that there would be an inspection at the hospital that day. In order not to give a bad image, someone from the management decided to get rid of the homeless young woman. They had literally thrown her out onto the street an hour ago. These words filled Tobias with a mixture of anger and helplessness. Where to look for Michaela now? During the drive home, he looked attentively through the car windows, hoping to see her in the middle of the crowd. But it was in vain. He could only hope that she remembered his address or his phone number. That night, Tobias barely slept, tossing and turning in bed and reviewing the events of the day over and over again. In the morning, when he left for the hospital to pick up his son, he drove carefully since the wind was blowing strongly on the road. Suddenly, upon slowing down, he noticed a familiar figure at a bus stop. The young woman, shivering with cold, was there holding the same box tightly as if it were her last amulet. Tobias stopped the car, got out, and called her softly. "Do you want me to take you?" Michaela was startled and looked up at him. "I tried to open it, but I couldn't," she murmured barely, still trembling. "Then we will solve it together," he replied calmly, trying not to scare her. "Now we will pick up Leon and go home." Tobias did not ask any more questions, but Michaela explained by herself. "Last night I asked an acquaintance from a shop to let me spend the night in her back room. In the morning, I decided to go to the city because it's easier to find something to eat there. When Leon learned that his father had found Michaela, he jumped out of bed filled with joy. That's great. Now we will be together." In the car, while they were on their way home, Leon and Michaela started to play with the box. They tried different combinations, laughed, and encouraged each other. Finally, to Tobias's surprise, they managed to place the wheels of the mechanism in the correct position. Inside they found an old key. "We did it!" Leon shouted, radiant with joy. Tobias, surprised and somewhat moved, looked at them. "And what is inside?" "A treasure." Leon solemnly opened the box and they found some ancient coins that had been inherited by the family for generations. They were authentic family heirlooms. Tobias could barely contain a smile. He had been wondering for a long time where his grandfather had hidden that family treasure. "Well, it seems that everything is starting to get better," he said, watching as Michaela took a coin carefully and observed it attentively. A year later, a wedding was celebrated on their farm. Tobias and Michaela, after overcoming so many difficulties, found the happiness they longed for so much. At the ceremony, everyone admired the love and warmth they shared, as well as their ability to rebuild their lives piece by piece. Soon, Leon had a little sister, whom he immediately assumed as his protector. "She's as smart as me," he would say with pride. The little girl, as if she understood her brother's words, looked at him attentively, radiating tranquility and trust. Sometimes Tobias remembered the words of his late wife. She used to say that if they managed to open the box, everything in life would find its place. And indeed, that was how it was. Love, it seems, arrives when you least expect it, but always in time to bring happiness to people.